MPAA actually would give you an R rating for 3 shits and a fuck
Okay.
in the film.
Right.
Yet they can kill like 100,000 people on screen and still get an R.
Yeah.
Yeah, or get an X.
Right.
Yeah.
So I wasn't prepared for this, but if I remember right, I believe what happened was when Wayne was working with a distributor, you actually had to submit the film to the ratings board, and it came back with an X rating. And so Siskel and Ebert were actually on a, I don't know if it's a crusade or whatever, but to get an adjustment to the rating system so that films like Life is Cheap didn't have to go out with an X. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is before NC-17. At that time, you couldn't, their theaters would not take an X rating, right? So then it would limit the theaters to basically porn theaters.
Yeah.
Which I
Like
don't
you
think
said,
that,
we would have to show at the Mitchell Brothers.
yeah,
Yeah.
which, you know, I mean, people are there to watch real porn, not duck porn, right? So.
But the distributor Silverlight actually gave our film an X rating on its own, so that it no, sorry, not an X rating, but an A rating, meaning adult,
Right.
Which was the thing that led into NC-17.
Right, and I think that was a made-up rating, right?
Yeah, it's
Like
a made-up rating.
Made up A.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah. How it was received, you can ask.
It was received really badly. Like, not only, now I remember there are a lot of theaters in the Midwest and the South would not show the film, or some of them would show it. They didn't realize what the film was really like, and they would cut out chunks of the film. We would get the film back, and chunks of it would be rolled off on the side. So that's a pretty different, era too.
I think a lot of Asian Americans were disappointed. There was a whole crew that I think that are sort of more like people like Curtis Choi, or they actually loved it. They liked it that he was, going out, taking it, and if you go back, Asian American cinema back then was relatively safe. Go back and look at all those titles. Yeah. They were sort of feel good, feel sorry for me, internment. I mean, I'm not putting them down. I'm just saying I made a lot of those. You know I mean, when you look at them now, they're kind of sappy, so his timing was kind of
because of all these films that Asian Americans were making, like what Spencer was doing. Anyway, there was a part of me that said, well, let's offend everyone, and I think that also came from the sense of frustration with Hong Kong money making, and the investors who wanted to make money, obviously, from the film. So I said, basically, I'm going to offend everyone. And that's the anger that was associated with that was very much part of the film and part of the creative energy of the film. But in the end, nobody liked the film at the time. But it's interesting now, I read a lot of the reviews coming up that this generation of critics actually appreciate the film.
Yeah, actually, the audio, when we screened it here, I was surprised, and maybe because you recut it, but but the audience response. I mean, I noticed a lot of people walked out or were offended, but always during the animal sequences, and mostly with the dog than with the ducks, because the people own dogs. You know what I'm saying? And so. That, but I remember back then, in the middle of a screening going out to have a cigarette. And some guy coming out with an Asian woman in the middle, and them kind of talking and him looking at me, and I knew he didn't like it. And I'm thinking, like, is this motherfucker gonna come? And sure enough, he comes up to me and he says, "That is the worst movie I've ever seen in my life," right? And I'm sitting there like, "Fuck you, man!" Like-
Well, actually, it was shown at the London Film Festival, and the first response was a very well-dressed older Englishman who was a professor in film,
okay.
and he said, "This is the worst film I have
Okay,
ever
you
seen."
saw.
Also, so I said, "I'm really proud of that, sir."
Hong Kong, where anything goes and everything happens. This is where cowboys rush to Japan for gold. But hell, I'm no cowboy.
Spencer and I had known each other for a long time. We were friends. We worked together on things. And I hired him to be the assistant when I shot Eat a Bowl of Tea in Hong Kong. So he had the same kind of visceral, frustration with making a film in Hong Kong and dealing with Hong Kong itself. And also reading the newspaper, collecting. We would actually sit down over these spam and egg breakfasts and talk about how funny Hong Kong is in distorting the reality of things. And I don't remember whether you read that story, but the whole thing about an actor sleeping with the girlfriend of the boss. I think you read it too, and then was punished by eating shit. So I said, "Oh, that would be a great thing for our story."
As a premise, yeah.
As a premise. And we started from there.
Yeah. Well, I think what I remember is during tea, you had already wanted to research Life is Cheap. So I was kind of doing two
jobs. Right.
And so I would meet people and then go back and tell him. And if I remember, I don't think it was from a news article. I think one of the great things about Hong Kong is the gossip, the talking. And I think John Chan, who was an executive producer on it, he was kind of connected to this whole entertainment, gangster. It was a cool time, right? Because all these, John Woo was working and Jackie Chan was huge, and then I remember the music scene was like Mu Yin Fong was hot, and his wife Cora was famous. I mean, if you walked around Hong Kong with his wife, you got swarmed. So nobody cared about Wayne.
They didn't. They called me Mr. Meow.
Yeah, Mr. Meow. Yeah. So anyway, that story I think was
from John Chan.
John Chan, and I think it was. I don't know if we can say I think it was supposed to be.
Well.
Or that was a rumor.
That was a rumor.
That
it was a well-known actor.
Well-known actor. Okay. Slept with the gangster's mistress, and then the next thing you know, nobody knows, but he ended up in the hospital having to get his stomach pumped.
Right.
And they said he basically had a flu, or he got sick, or
he had food poisoning.
He had food poisoning, yeah. And so he was shut down for like a couple of weeks, and he couldn't film and whatever. But behind the scenes, and what everybody on the street was talking was that he ate shit. They made him So that's where the stories were always kind of coming from, were people.
看你們要看你們的啦。嚟，我哋請羅老大飲返杯。
That was the time where the gangsters were trying to take over the film industry, and producers would get machine gun in their offices. And that was also the time where Cora, my wife, was approached by one of the big gangsters and said, you have to be in this movie. She had to take it. And I tried to accompany her to one of the sets, which was a really fancy nightclub without an exit door. There's only the front entrance. And one night it was completely surrounded by people with knives and sticks from another gang. Nobody could get out. So it was pretty crazy. So after that, that's when I said to Cora, let's not go back to Hong Kong to make any films because it's too crazy.
So that's what he brought me into.
Yeah.
咸豐年啲嘢唔好炒出嚟鬧咧，嗰啲我係紅衛兵嚟噶嘛。
I learned a lot that, first of all, just how good everybody else was that, had to do it every day. Like, to be honest with you, when doing a scene with, say, Cora, during that whole, you feel small, you know what I mean? Like, you don't know what to, so it's kind of natural to just like, oh shit, she's for real.
I felt that Eat a Bowl of Tea was too normal a role for her. And she basically got very bored with it. So I said, okay, then you can play a prostitute. And she said, okay.
You see, I'm an anthropologist, documenting a specific species of fish which Chinese have consumed historically in America.
Like Don Chan who plays the anthropologist, he's the executive producer. And his wife was actually an anthropologist. So Wayne kind of geniusly just combined.
That's how the portraits came about. I just couldn't combine things.
And then some are characters or actors that he admired, like the guy was when he was young. So the director, right?
The guy who played the gangster boss is Lo Wai, who was a very handsome actor in his early days, and then he was the one who discovered Bruce Lee and did all the early Bruce Lee films. And then there were other actors who were really good actors who never got a good role. So we also cast them in different things.
That was the other one was the singer.
She was the sexiest actress that I, as a young teenager, was very interested in. And, she was getting old, and I heard that she needed money, so we paid her pretty good money to come and sing. She's not a singer. She's actually more a sex star.
You want to buy a Rolex? Want to buy a Rolex? You want to buy a Rolex? Come here.
Victor Wong is like my alter ego. I mean, I first met him doing theater here in San Francisco with the Asian American Theater Company. And I just, for some reason, I love his work and I like his personality. He is someone who would go out of his way to offend people. I mean, whatever he did, even like a simple meeting over coffee, he would offend that person in a nice, funny way. And yet there is a humanity about him that comes across.
As I remember too, initially, he was supposed to be the main character, not me. And I still don't remember why he changed his mind or if Victor couldn't make it.
I think I got scared because he had too many ideas that weren't quite right for the role. And I'd rather have you do it because you could be like literally the man with no name, as I said earlier,
Right.
without a lot of expression.
Right.
And the other thing that you said, like it's harder for you because you didn't understand the language. The kind of, you know, ignorance that you would have as somebody from the outside fits the part better.
Yeah, the ignorant part.
Yeah.
I didn't have to work too hard on that. That was.
文革那段岁月，你们也应该了解吧？他们要我谈样板戏，我拒绝了。
There were so many Cultural Revolution stories.
Oh yeah.
And I
that's right,
think
Yeah.
John was writing, you know, a short story about some of the survivors of the Cultural Revolution, and that was one of the stories that came out. So everything that he said is probably basically pretty true about this pianist. He is one of the three main leads that Zhang Qie, the action director that I was talking about with the Shaw Brothers, he is really famous for playing these very righteous, you know, main lead guys. So I thought it would be great for him to, you know, have one arm, which is also kind of a, you know, funny joke on the one-armed swordsman.
And then that red guard guy, you know, the guy who he's screaming at me. I mean, it's like, and I think Wayne was cracking the whip like more, you know. I mean, the thing with working with Wayne is the motto is, you know, there's never a bad idea. Right? So it's like, you got to throw the kitchen sink at him and see what bites, right?
But it's really stressful, you know, because a lot of times you're there and nothing is quite right. So you have to kind of manipulate things until you get the irony or the complexity of the character out. So like the prostitute was an interesting one because she was not as interesting as we thought she would be. So we had to create that whole thing.
He just
you
kept
know.
throwing objects at her.
Yeah.
Hey, hold this. Actually, Amir had a lot to do with stuff too. He had a sixth sense, and him and Amir together they're really great. So, I mean, those things with the portraits and they would huddle. I don't know what the hell they're talking about, and the next thing you know, they have it set up and figured out.
Well, usually he'll come over and say, "This is really boring, Wayne." No, Amir is really creative. I mean, he has a very, very creative mind. And the whole portrait idea and how we would do it all kind of originated with him. So the way even like what Spencer was saying earlier, a lot of times we would shoot the scene like we're doing now. You're not on camera. And we would just shoot the character and frame it like a portrait. One of the things with Eat a Bowl of Tea was that it was period. The locations were very limiting. So if you pan the camera like a couple of inches, then you would see something you don't want to see. And Amir used a lot of lights, which I always were arguing with him about. So why do we have 10 lights on this one scene with two people? So I gave him the proposal on Life is Cheap is that you can only use one light. You remember that?
Yeah, well, and
Only one
the grip
light.
truck had to be a van,
Yeah.
not a truck.
Well, but I gave him the option to shoot any time of the day he wanted because he was always complaining, why are we shooting this in the morning? The light is not right. So I go, you can shoot this at any time of the day you want, but you only get one light. So that was also quite creative. So his palette was very limited in that way.
One of the things I remember is being nervous and scared a lot because even though, like, when I saw the film again, on screen. Just how like we never got permission anywhere, right? and so I mean I was watching, I would lose track of the story because I remember like looking around, like we would shoot the scene and looking around, and I mean we're in public places where they would tell me to walk in the middle of Central, right? And I'm like in a cowboy outfit, right? It's like, I mean, and you're walking and everybody's looking at you, and then, it was pretty. Looking back on it, and the strategies that Wayne and Amir and the production manager all kind of incorporated to pull stuff off. There was always like a van waiting just in case, right? I remember being on the subway and they dressed up a guy in a wheelchair.
Right.
So the guy in the wheelchair was holding the camera, and Amir was pushing the wheelchair. And then as soon as the train started moving, then they set everything up.
So we can,
Shot it.
Yeah.
And then, even shot guys running. And then they would run out of the subway station so we wouldn't get caught, right? So it was kind of every day there was some kind of adventure.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
again, it was a reaction to shooting Eat Ebola Tea, which was a studio movie. And the studio would always say, oh, you're not going to get permission to shoot here. So we had to do everything by the books. So this was a release from that. So we freed ourselves
Yeah.
and put Spencer in a cowboy hat and boots in the middle of the craziest part of the city.
And some of it was actually very smart. Like, I don't know if you remember, but Kowloon City was hands off, right? You're not allowed in there. But we had a crew member, Polly, that lived in Kowloon City. So she was kind of our tour guide during that production.
And that place, I wish we had shot more of it because it was a city literally created by the people. They took electricity from legal places and made their own electricity. Everything was created. The water is stolen from somewhere also, and it's a huge complex of buildings, and in the middle was a church, and the church was so quiet and so serene. It's pretty amazing. There's actually a whole book of still photographs about Kowloon City, the Wall City, I think it's called.
And I think it was Wayne that said, I want people to get bored during the chase. It's like, what? Right? Like, and I'm just kind of sitting there like, what are these guys talking about? Right? It's like, oh, they're being chased.
But I have to also, give a lot of credit to Amir, who insisted on using a Panavision, film camera, which is 100 pounds,
Yeah, it's
right?
huge. It was huge.
To handhold and chase after these guys who were running like crazy through the streets. I mean, some days I thought Amir was going to run into an accident. There's one part where he's crisscrossing a busy street, but he did it, and I think in the end his back was giving out.
I think we messed him up. There's scenes in there too where he's actually on a bicycle. So he's riding a bicycle. He gets to a point. I think it's a part of the steps. Then when it comes to the steps, he has it arranged so that he's going to get off the bike
and then keep running.
And keep running.
Yeah.
And so that move is so smooth that it's kept.
Yeah.
It's not cut. And so there was a point where the guy threw up.
Yeah. That was real because they were running
the guy
so
was
hard.
running so hard. And Amir lost his eyebrow.
because the viewfinder kept rubbing against
Rubbing
it,
so
running.
hard against it.
Yeah.
He had no eyebrow, I remember.
I was working on Eat a Bowl of Tea with Mark Adler, who's a very talented music composer. And I said, would you be interested in helping me do a track for this? I'm just gonna, you're not gonna get it, you're not gonna compose anything. I'll show it to all the musicians once, and you guys just play along to it from beginning to end. And they did that. I think they did it for a few takes, and it was wonderful. It's like jazz improvised to the chase.
John Chan and you, didn't you and they composed the opening
credit.
song with Maria.
Yeah.
Maria was a famous singer at the time.
She
Maria.
was kind of like the Aretha Franklin of Hong Kong.
She was Filipino.
She's a big woman,
Yeah.
great strong voice, and sang kind of very bluesy.
So they got her.
Yeah.
And that song is pretty rough, translation wise.
Well,
right?
the lyrics are
yeah,
pretty
the
rough.
lyrics are rough. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway.
So that's why we didn't. What are the lyrics? It has.
It's
It
like
has
die,
die, die, die,
it's
kill,
like
kill, kill, chop, chop, chop. You know, it's a very rappy song.
I was actually at Wayne's house not long after Life is Cheap came out, and he got a call from the producers of, or the casting, either producers or casting directors of like RoboCop 3 or 4.
Right.
Okay. And so they were asking him about me, right?
Yeah.
And so then he says something like, well, he's right here. You can. And so there's if you've seen that film, there's an evil guy.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking like, okay, they're going to ask me, the first question they asked me is, how tall are you? And I remember in one of the reviews, for whatever reason, it actually said I was tall. And I'm 5'5". I'm not, he's tall, I'm not tall. And so I remember saying, how tall am I, right? Like, you know, and then Wayne immediately picked up on, he said, 5'10". Tell him you're right. And I said, 5'5". They said, okay, bye.
Well, I know I couldn't get arrested after that movie. I mean, I couldn't get financing. I couldn't get a job in Hollywood. I couldn't do anything. It's interesting. I mean, I didn't care about what the film would do, and I did it that way. But it really hurt me in the end. But it's okay. You know, there's always sort of these ups and downs with the whole film career. Well, there's a graduate thesis that I found just standing at City Lights and reading it, and this woman wrote that, you know, I think the title is called One for You and One for Me, and it's about my career. And what she was saying is that I would do one sort of more predictable, you know, film, and then I would just go off and do something for myself, which is pretty true. You know, I got scared along the way somewhere, and some things and I got older too. So, but I still have that energy in me. And I was saying in the car coming over, we should do Life is Cheap here.
In the Trump era.
Yeah.